The crowd was electric, a deafening roar of voices surging through the arena like a tidal wave. The air itself felt charged, humming with anticipation as two of the most dominant forces in combat sports prepared to collide. This wasn't just a fight, it was a battle of legacies. On one side stood Daniel Cormier, a warrior whose relentless drive and iron will had carved his name into the annals of MMA history. A two-division champion, a master of wrestling, and a man who had faced and conquered some of the most dangerous fighters in the world. On the other side, a beast of a man, a former UFC heavyweight champion and WWE icon, Brock Lesnar. A physical specimen unlike any other, built for destruction, with raw power that had crushed opponents in seconds. The octagon had seen countless fights, but nothing quite like this. For years, fans had debated what would happen if these two titans met inside the cage. Would Cormier's elite wrestling and fight IQ be enough to neutralize the sheer force of Lesnar? Or would the heavyweight monster bulldoze his way to another victory, reminding the world why he was once the most feared man in the division? The tension had been building long before this night. It started with a confrontation that sent shockwaves through the MMA world, a moment that turned speculation into reality. After Cormier's triumph at UFC 226, a new challenger stepped forward. Not with quiet diplomacy, but with a storm of aggression. Lesnar, towering over Cormier, shoved him with the force of a freight train, cutting a promo that ignited a firestorm of hype. The challenge was made. The fight was inevitable. But this wasn't just about championships. This was about pride, about proving who was truly the baddest man on the planet. Cormier had spent his life overcoming the odds, fighting in a division where he was always undersized but never outmatched. His wrestling was a weapon, his striking sharp, his heart unbreakable. Lesnar, on the other hand, had always been a force of nature, a once-in-a-generation athlete whose sheer size and speed defied logic. His return to the UFC wasn't just a comeback, it was a statement. And standing in his way was a man unwilling to be intimidated, unwilling to back down. As the fight approached, analysts dissected every possible outcome. Could Cormier's technique and strategy dismantle the brute force of Lesnar? Or would the sheer power of the former heavyweight champion be too much to handle? Some believed Lesnar had lost a step, that time away from the sport had dulled his edge. Others argued that his wrestling background and sheer explosiveness made him more dangerous than ever. Meanwhile, Cormier trained like a man possessed, knowing full well what was at stake. The fight wasn't just another title defense, it was a battle that would define his legacy. Now, under the bright lights, with millions watching around the world, time for talk was over. The referee called them to the center, and the difference in size was staggering. Cormier, stocky but compact, stared up at a man who looked like he had been carved from stone. Lesnar, breathing heavily, his muscles tensed, looked down with a predator's gaze. The energy in the arena reached a fever pitch as the crowd erupted, knowing that in just moments, history would be written in the blood, sweat, and sheer force of two warriors colliding. The cage door locked. The world held its breath. And then, the opening bell hadn't even rung, yet the tension inside the cage felt suffocating. Cormier stood firm, rolling his shoulders, his eyes locked onto the behemoth in front of him. Lesnar, pacing like a caged animal, exhaled through his nose in sharp bursts, his massive chest rising and falling. The referee gave the final instructions, but neither man really listened. This wasn't about rules, it was about dominance. A lifetime of training, of battles won and lessons learned, had led them both to this moment. Then, with a sharp gesture, the fight was on. Lesnar charged like a bull unleashed, covering the distance between them in a heartbeat. The sheer speed of the giant was terrifying. Cormier had expected power, but the way Lesnar moved was something else entirely. A thunderous right hand cut through the air. Cormier barely slipped it, feeling the wind of the strike graze his ear. Then came the force of impact as Lesnar slammed into him, a tackle that sent shockwaves through the arena. The cage rattled. The audience roared. Cormier, pinned against the fence, braced himself against an avalanche of muscle. The strategy was clear. Lesnar wasn't interested in a technical fight. He wanted to smother, overwhelm, crush. Cormier's back burned from the pressure, but he had been here before. Years of grinding in the wrestling room had prepared him for moments like this. With a quick shift of his hips, he fought for an underhook, creating just enough space to maneuver. Lesnar's grip tightened, but Cormier, smaller yet sharper, found the angle. A short, brutal elbow to the temple made the giant flinch. Another followed. Then another. The grip loosened, just enough for Cormier to twist out. The escape was swift, but Lesnar was relentless. The moment Cormier created distance, another storm of power came his way. A looping overhand caught his shoulder, sending him stumbling. The crowd gasped. Cormier, regaining his footing, shook it off. He had felt worse. He had fought through worse. But Lesnar was pressing forward, refusing to give him a moment to breathe. The sheer pressure was suffocating, a relentless tide threatening to drown him. Then came the twist. Just as Lesnar stepped in for another assault, Cormier did something unexpected. Instead of retreating, he planted his feet and met power with precision. A perfectly timed uppercut cut through the chaos, snapping Lesnar's head back. The giant stumbled. It wasn't just a clean shot, it was the first sign that Cormier could hurt him. The crowd's roar shifted. The energy in the air crackled. For the first time, doubt flickered in Lesnar's eyes. Cormier wasn't done. He capitalized, pressing forward with calculated aggression. Another sharp right hand. A left hook to the body. Lesnar winced. The monster had been hit before, but Cormier wasn't throwing wild punches, he was breaking him down, piece by piece. The fight, once an overwhelming storm in Lesnar's favor, was tilting. But the beast was still standing, still dangerous, and still had one devastating trick left up his sleeve. Just when Cormier looked to seize control, Lesnar, battered but far from finished, made a move that no one saw coming. Lesnar, wobbling for the first time in the fight, took a deep breath and did what no one expected. He smiled. It wasn't the grin of a man who was winning, nor the smirk of someone in control. It was something more primal, more dangerous. A flash of teeth, a recognition of the battle at hand. Cormier, always the strategist, knew what that meant. Lesnar wasn't broken. He was enjoying this, and that made him even more unpredictable. Then, without warning, Lesnar exploded forward. His arms wrapped around Cormier in a crushing grip, lifting the smaller man clean off his feet. The crowd erupted as Lesnar executed a takedown so powerful that the entire octagon seemed to shake. Cormier hit the canvas hard, his body absorbing the shock as Lesnar's weight pressed down on him. This was the worst position to be in. A man that size with that kind of wrestling pedigree, on top of you, it was a nightmare. But Cormier wasn't panicking. He had been here before. Trapped beneath bigger men, forced to find a way out when none seemed possible. As Lesnar postured up, aiming to rain down sledgehammer-like fists, Cormier made his move. A slight shift of the hips, a well-timed buck, and suddenly he was no longer just surviving, he was escaping. Lesnar swung, but Cormier slipped free, scrambling to his feet. The crowd was on its feet now, watching two of the greatest heavyweights in history throw everything they had at each other. Cormier, breathing heavily, wiped blood from the side of his face. Lesnar, still grinning, stalked forward. But something had changed. The beast was slowing. His punches weren't landing as cleanly. His footwork was becoming labored. The tide had shifted, and Cormier could feel it. He just needed the right opening. And then it came. Lesnar threw a desperate overhand right, putting everything into the punch. Cormier saw it a split second before it came, ducking under it effortlessly. And then, in a flash, he struck. A perfectly placed right hand landed flush on Lesnar's chin. The impact sent a ripple through the giant's frame. His legs buckled. His arms flailed for balance. And then, for the first time in his career, Brock Lesnar collapsed. The arena erupted. Cormier, knowing hesitation could cost him, pounced. He mounted Lesnar, raining down hammer fists, each strike carrying years of sacrifice, years of proving himself against men who were supposed to be bigger, stronger, better. The referee hovered close, watching, waiting. Lesnar struggled, but his body wasn't responding the way it once did. Another clean shot landed. Then another. And finally, the referee had seen enough. He dove in, pulling Cormier away, signaling the end. The fight was over. Cormier, exhausted but victorious, stood over the fallen giant, his chest heaving. The crowd's deafening roar filled every corner of the arena. He had done it. He had faced the beast, endured the storm, and emerged as the last man standing. Lesnar, dazed, sat up slowly, the realization settling in. The unstoppable force had been stopped. But just as the dust seemed to settle, as the crowd's cheers hit their peak, Lesnar did something that no one saw coming. He pushed himself up, walked over to Cormier, and extended his hand. A moment of silence fell over the arena. Cormier, still catching his breath, studied the outstretched hand. And then, slowly, he took it. The fight was over, but the respect had just begun. Two warriors, two legends, leaving everything inside that cage. And as Cormier raised his arms in victory, Lesnar nodded, acknowledging what the world had just witnessed. A battle for the ages, a clash that would be remembered for years to come. No controversy. No excuses. Just pure, unfiltered combat. And in that moment, under the bright lights, the legacy of both men was sealed forever.